I'm going to do something I don't normally do to try and avoid the waffle, which is read from a prepared speech. No, really.
Sorry, Rick.
No, you're not.
No, I'm not.
Right, morning, folks. The slots are only 45 minutes, so I'm just going to get on with it. I appreciate I'm one of the rare beasts in the room that has never jumped in the United States, ever. And opposed to some of you, you may have gone several times a year or even lived and worked out there. So little of this goes out to those who haven't been ever to America, if that's even possible in skydiving these days. Please note from the outset that I view everyone on both sides of the title as superheroes amongst mere mortals. Mere mortals are in other rooms. We know what we're on about. Okay, that's what we're going to do. In the Fun Pack program, I'm going through how and why I got the chance to qualify as an FAA Master Rigger, the course content, the process of qualifying, a little bit on the extracurricular I managed to add in whilst I'm in Florida and also what I think the differences really are between the two countries' ratings. Finally, before inviting some questions and throwing it out there for you to throw bricks at me, I'll offer some thoughts and recommendations of my own. I'm going to point out, for the benefit of the tape, and bearing in mind the power of social media, that in almost every case I'm offering my personal opinion and viewpoint based on my experience last autumn over at Elite Rigging Academy. Most of what I'm going to say is in no way British skydiving or FAA opinion, and certainly not my works either, because they paid for the thing. It's going to be all mine, okay? So feel free to quote me, but I'd appreciate it if I say something that you really take a strong issue with, that you pay the correct liquid entry in an inquiry fee. Liquid entry fees are a different thing altogether. Liquid inquiry fee in any of the available bars, and we can have a conversation, or more likely you can probably set me straight and tell me where I've gone wrong.
Wait, stop waffling. Just get on.
Oh, that's not waffle, that's written like that. I write like a waffler. That's why the BPA Mag likes me so much. Okay, the inevitable me slide. As few of you in the room know, now I've been a skydiver on and off, sometimes okay, and mostly pretty badly. For 40 years, UK rigger for well over 30. In that time, I've worked in several related fields for both the sport, military parachute suppliers and maintainers. Because of this background in parachute maintenance and repair, I currently work within defence equipment and supply, and as part of a small MOD team looking into airworthiness and trials and certification and assurance strategies for military parachute systems, both now and in the future. That is not a prediction, but you never know, do you? And it's a funky picture. Now, it was identified by the team I'm part of that we needed more knowledge of how the USA certify their parachutes, the TSO process, etc., and how they control their design and testing. I identified to the team an intensive course in Florida at the Elite Rigging Academy in Zephyr Hills to become an FAA American rigger. As a current BS rigger examiner, and I apologize now for when I mix up BS with BPA, it's going to happen. I'm of that age. So I will say BPA at some point. I just did. I was actually the only one in our team eligible to attain a US FAA Master Rigger status. Effectively, the course for me would be differences training, the way I saw it. But in learning the differences between the BS and FAA systems, we'd gain more knowledge that the team needed. I, on the other hand, get the certificate on the wall and a new seal die for my heavily worn sealing kit, because after many, many years of use, and as some as you may know, I never pack a reserve without a lead seal, and I haven't done that since about 1994. I've always lead sealed all my reserve pack jobs, and at times I've been the one that was laughed at for doing it, but to you. And my seal dies are getting pretty worn now. I still didn't quite believe it. I'd made it to Florida with very few problems until I found myself in the hotel at Zephyr Hills. If I'm honest, I blundered my way through how one gets to fly and live and survive in Florida for a month, because believe it or not, I haven't been on a long-haul flight anywhere for 18 years. And back then it was with a young family and we weren't going skydiving. So relearning how to travel was a struggle for me. I'm registered disabled. With hindsight, I probably should have pushed that fact a little harder to get some better service from the airline and the car hire people. If you are registered disabled and you don't want to have you take your feet off to go through customs, then I highly recommend you kick off loudly before you book the ticket. Once installed in the hotel and with everything unpacked for a long stay, I had the weekend to acclimatize myself to American life, try and understand the traffic light rules, still don't get it, and of course get the most essential items for the room. Floridians, as they call themselves, don't they're really decent people, they're very polite, but our cousins still don't get it. And Boston Harbor's got a lot to answer for. The mug was because Florida hotels also are allergic to the concept of recycling. I don't know if you know this, but you can't get anything but paper, plastic, and throwaway polystyrene utensils every single morning. I think it came in with COVID, and they've just never got rid of it, which is lunacy. Elite Rigging Academy facility is the old Sunpath factory, 10 minutes drive from Zephyr Hills, main drag, about 30 seconds drive from Skydive Z Hills itself. To date, Google Earth it. I could put a slide up of Google Earth, but what's the point? To date, Elite Rigging Academies ran over 50 FAA rigging courses, and as we sit here today, course 55 should be in its finals today. I'm happy to give you a shout out to Sarah Gonzalez at Elite, who somehow choreographs all the admin side to get everyone ready to be on course whilst keeping Derek in check too. Oh, that took its time. That one's Sarah. I'm just going to embarrass her on live TV. Yeah, she does all the admin side and keeps Derek and his troop, mostly Derek, in check. And you're late, you have to do push-ups. In German. Yeah. Okay. An advanced, so yeah, Sarah was all over it. She'd send out an advanced study pack. It arrived quite a long time before the flights were booked. And she gave me endless answers to all the dumb questions I kept emailing to her, like, well, what's the weather like in Florida at this time of year? Because I just, didn't know. And she really put up with a lot of stupid questions from me. The most important part of this package, which was advice to get on a thing called the Dauntless FAA training app. It's a superb learning device. There's the first thing we should learn. Oops, go back one. Go back one, thank you. We could really stand to learn something about this, the thing we should do in this country. It's everything you need as a training app, everything you need to study in depth, or just learn all the FAA pool of 320 questions by rote. Once it was loaded up, I could comfortably work on anything I wanted, anytime I had 5 minutes free, right up until the weekend before the test. It could be viewed as overkill, but I also took some hours in the weeks before I went on course to refamiliarize myself with a range of these. Yeah, I know, scary, isn't it?
Was that a parasailing company?
Yeah, it was. Well, what can I tell you? It's the FAA app. So yeah, I was actually glad I did that, and that's not. I pulled up, grabbed a few museums full of front mounts of different eras. The oldest one was 1956, and went through them all for my own benefit. I'm really glad I did that, and I'll come back to that. Placing the staff then. Elite I don't know if you can make those pictures out. Elite have got a huge range of available machines to work with. We had our own classroom area, packing areas for both squares and rounds. Elite also produces all manner of equipment for other companies. They also assemble and pack a wide variety of different types of parachutes for many customers, both military and civilian. Production sections kept separate from our dedicated course area. So I don't know if you can make, that's pretty much down that wall there. That's all the training side. Beyond that is production stuff. And right over in the corner, which I didn't take pictures of, because it's a little off topic, is Derek Thomas's enormous collection of Triumph motorbikes, which was pretty cool. Right, that should animate, but it hasn't. Derek Thomas, does he really need an introduction? I don't think so. He's the Elite's Presidente. That's his best side. He's a long history of skydiving. I'm not going to get into that. Doesn't need any introduction at all. He's officially been rigging since the 70s, president of Sunpath for many years, and he's got a call on an awfully good pool of people. In this case, I got Sally Craig, who's done, I won't go on about her CV either, but she's done an awful lot of stuff. Ran the Z Hills rigging facility for quite a long time too. Rags Riganti, first time I'd met him, knocking on a bit, top bloke. We were lucky to get him, because he's not in the best of health, but he really did write the book on how we patch stuff today. One of the machines, in fact, the machine he sat at there used to put Pegasus canopies together. For anybody under 100 years old, look it up. Rags literally wrote the book on modern patching techniques. So I was really lucky to get him. And it's one of those moments where you do a lesson and it just straight away, you scribble some notes, go home, and you're back to the hotel and think, I've just changed what I'm going to teach for patching from now on. Little hidden gems in everything he said and did, right down to running the machine. The nature and the amount of American skydiving which takes place means that these folks, of course, have learned an awful lot of stuff from a lot of market leaders over many, many years. The meat of the course is 2 weeks of reserve packing, canopy, container repairs, with the third week mostly dedicated to testing. You notice I didn't say anything about building anything. Elite have a collection of about 20 different written off reserve and container combinations to play with. Even I found one I'd not met before, which was a nice challenge for me. The potential master riggers all moved on to harness work. The 2 seniors that were there carried on with more packing. By the end of week 1, we also got quite used to rapid fire oral question sessions every morning. There's a pool of about 50 of what are going to be Derek's favourite oral questions that he's going to hit you with on the last week. And we basically went around the room, question, like a university challenge every morning for half an hour to bring ourselves up to speed. The only real struggle for me on the course, if I'm honest, were those written and oral tests. I had to overlay the correct American rules and regs in place of the UK ones that are stuck in here for the last 30 years. Some of the rules and regs are identical to ours, no problem. Others are quite different. I've also come to realise, actually, personally, I'm pretty good at practical stuff and applied study, but if it's a cold, factual, written exam, I struggle with that. It came up when I learned to be a pilot as well. At 55, I suddenly discovered that despite half the books in my house being nothing but aviation-related stuff, I actually couldn't read written exams and learn and give them the answers. If I went up in the aircraft and flew that rule or that regulation, then it was in for life. But I had to apply it, which was a bit of a thing for me. Anyway, that's what happened with me. I just had to learn those things off the app until I could rattle off the answers. It was the only way for me to do it. There was one other FAA-related hiccup. Pete knows about this only too well. As I was coming in with a foreign rating, FAA require a covering letter stating that my packing experiences got da-dee-da-dee-da. Although it had been pre-submitted before I left with Pete's nice signature on it, and I thought, well, it doesn't get better than that. I've got chairman or rigger's signature there. That'll do it. Unfortunately, the wording in the sentence didn't quite satisfy the FAA inspector's interpretation of what he's looking for. And I'll explain a bit about that. An FAA inspector covers his region using the rules and regs he's given. And one day he could be an FAA inspector covering air traffic qualifications. The next day he'd go in and he's doing aircraft engineers, all FAA ratings. Once in a blue moon, because it's quite rare, parachute riggers. So he's got no wiggle room. He doesn't know parachuting. He's got no wiggle room to interpret his rules. And more often than not, he's got no knowledge of parachuting and the parachuting world. So his visit timings, he's a booked slot, require that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted. It's only a lucky few emails, and Pete being near an email, that bailed me out as he said, well, I'm not happy with the wording of that letter there. And we had to flash back and forwards most of the day, as I recall, getting that exactly how he wanted it. Otherwise, I'd have been packing my bags and trying to explain to the boss at work why nothing was going on. Okay, week 3 began with a drive to the Z Hills, south of Z Hills, to the FAA testing facility. Again, it's this great big federal machine where you have to drive off-site, go find a testing facility, and in the office, waiting their turn are your air traffic control students, your pilots, your engineers, and then a bunch of riggers. And when it's your turn, you go through. There's a silent exam room with random others. You click start. And you have 2 hours to answer your 50 randomized questions. So no 2 people get the same questions out of that pool. It's all computer generated. And there are some grockles in there. So all that 320 questions that you had to learn the answers for, there are some grockles in there deliberately to try and catch you out and trip you up a little. Just a few. As soon as you're done, you come outside, there's a pass certificate printed, and that's over. And thanks to that revision app and Derek's advice to get the scores on the testing programs up to about the 90% point, it was a doddle. But I have to say, like I said, that I spent an awful lot of time in the hotel at night just hitting the button and retesting and retesting and retesting, raising the percentage. We went off to celebrate with a pizza at Derek's Humble Wee Cottage. It should have been animated as well, but that's Derek's Humble Wee Cottage. So anyone who says rigging doesn't pay, we're doing it wrong, guys. Okay. Rest of the week spent working through the course in small groups, 2s, 3s, with practical testing of everything we'd learnt. The final stage before the final decision and a handshake from Derek is this oral exam where you go off to a corner and he sits you down and he hits you with as many of those 50 questions as he wants till he's happy. So by no means would I say that just because you went over there and I've got a rigger examiner and, you know, I'm a Brit too. By no means did I go over to Derek's and just get a tick box handshake and, yeah, that's done, we'll give you the certificate in 3 weeks' time. He did put me through it, which is kind of what I wanted. Okay. Some of us had gained nothing by getting away earlier, so no one really minded that the military folks on the course were dealt with first. In fact, 3 of us stayed right up until Friday evening, squaring away the work areas. Little mention there. You've got a sizable cross-section of humanity. There's a Colombian, there's a Brit, there's, I said an ex-Marine Corps, but she slapped me on the head and said nobody ever leaves the United States Marine Corps, so she's still in the US Marine Corps even though she doesn't wear the uniform. Gave me a hug on Veterans Day. I don't quite, it's the American way. But yeah, there's a USMC lady there, there's a guy from Vancouver, and a fair few Canadian and American survival technicians. They seem to, even Canada is sending them all the way down to Florida to get this course done, which was interesting for me with work and what I do. So yeah, that's, and then like I said, a couple of us stuck around to do a bit of cleaning and tidying up, just to prove I do know how a Hoover works. We grabbed a celebratory meal, the last few of us, at Derek's favourite restaurant in Dade City. It's a great way to end a pretty intense 3 weeks. And I made some good friends along the way, and that's not a bad thing. Oh, and I had to leave the elite staff one final donation to say thank you, so I left it with them, because these people have got to learn. We've got to get them to understand how tea works. It's just, what can I say? Extracurricular. For myself, the 4th week in Florida, because who would go to Florida on a course without grabbing an extra week? It really morphed into a bunch of visits to several different parachute manufacturers in Z Hills and DeLand, and I'd reached out to them in advance of traveling. All those parties went out of their way to give me their own experiences of working and building parachute systems within the USA, and that ticked the boxes, I hope, for work with the TSO malarkey. Learned a lot more about TSO and where that all fits. And that's another story. Meetings didn't stop me taking a few sites in between meetings. So just a few inevitable holiday type shots. I suppose that's work really, that's at UPT. That's got parachutes on the back, so that counts. Didn't take my rig along. So the USA are gonna have to wait just a little longer to be blessed by my skydiving skills. They just have to wait a little longer. I'm not sure if this will work. What are the chances? Unlikely. Oh, it didn't. That's a shame. That was a video of the Saturn V rocket that's in the NASA thing. That was my big indulgence. I didn't do any meetings that day. I gave myself a day in NASA. It still counts. There's parachutes on those as well. I did ring the bell in the bar at the Z Hills Parachute Center because it's my first time on a US drop zone, and you should buy a crate, so I did. And if I wasn't revising back in a hotel or eating, I used every waking hour to look and drive around, because it's not like I get to America very often, so I never drove the same route twice if I could possibly help it. I got to get some flying in, free and easy flying over there. I went over, told the guy that I didn't want to get any American qualifications, but if he'd sit there, I'd pay him as an instructor and just go flying. So I met this nice guy, and we went off 2 times off around the Gulf of Mexico in a Cessna, cruising around, and he did the takeoffs and landings because he knows his airfield. And just talked politics the whole way and had a laugh. It was good fun. So whilst that footage fails to run of the 1960s, the former most powerful rocket in the world, Derek and I discussed many times the pros and cons of a BS rigger coming over there to go for the FAA ratings. Derek's still got his advanced rating with us. So for equivalence, I'll say the FAA senior rating is probably above our AP rating, and the FAA Masters is probably somewhere well below our advanced rating. The right amount of log pack jobs, I think even a time served and current advanced packer could achieve an FAA senior or even a Masters pretty easily. I would advise that they add the round ticket to their list though, the unhold thing that nobody ever bothers with anymore, advanced packer round. And they'd need 100 reserve pack jobs per type if they wanted to go for Masters. And to the FAA, that means lap, seat, back, and chest. Nobody in America has seen a lap one. that they all laugh at that one themselves, but the FAA rule says lap, seat, back or chest. So if you have a letter saying you've got 100 pack jobs on, those ones, then you're away. And that's if you're going for the masters. And one, I've got to point out that even with the American ratings, a UK advanced packer with an American license, if they were to go and do that, may raise huge questions about limitations of work when they come back here. Because as you know, advanced packer, I really believe an advanced packer square with some round knowledge and the right letter from somebody could head over there, come back with an American master's rating, and have the ability to sew stuff and repair stuff. As you know, as an advanced packer, you can't do that in this country. So I think there'd be some questions raised, but I don't see physically any problem with it happening that way. The bit about round canopy seems a bit of a throwback, but it's about the FAA being this huge transcontinental system. I've packed an awful lot of stuff since 1981, but I'm glad the one over-indulgent bit of prep I did was go find 2 museums full of front mounts and work through them all. Because just to remind myself of all the weird and wonderful ways front mounts work. The FAA system and the FAR rules, which as we know is a bit of a super tanker when it comes to changing course. They're notorious for never changing their rules. It's all still full of stuff and exam questions to do with parachutes, which in the sport here, we haven't seen them since the 60s and 70s. I don't know how many times in that question pool it talks about bias constructed rounds. Yeah. So the front mount prep I'd done really paid off, because guess what one of my exam pack jobs was? My overall cost of what amounted to a month abroad with hotels, cars, course fees, etc. were high, and yes, the company helped me with most of it. But you could reduce the total time to attend that course. In other words, skip the 4th week. Workplace also did the bookings the most expensive way, because that's what they do. For example, Skydive Z Hills has rentable accommodation, and it's a minute's walk from Elite Rigging Academy. I hired a car, didn't need to. I last saw one of the qualified senior riggers, the young fella from Vancouver actually, and he was working on when I popped into Skydive Wings and had a chat with them, and there he was working in there, packing away and doing stuff in there, and he'd literally become a senior rigger the week before, and he picked himself a job up there. And the DZ as well is right there for some extra sort of post-course experience. On reflection, I think this could really suit a Method 2 basic rigger who wants to combine a Florida skydiving experience with a compressed session of logged work towards his 200 required hours. Of course, Derek's abroad. He can't teach the courses. That's our rules. So that can't happen. But there's nothing to stop him supervising someone under Method 2 as they build what Derek tells them to build. Because Derek's still a UK advanced rigger, you'd still have a very experienced supervisor to sign off your logbook. And I've got a note here that the big difference is the FAA don't build anything. Not a thing. All they do is repair stuff. And it's all about the repairs. And it's something we don't put as much emphasis on over here. There's good reasons it's ended up that way. I had a bit of an exercise, a harness exercise given to me over there to get a harness and get in there and do some master rigger type repair work, and I did. But it took me a day because of all the unpicking. And as you know, to unpick a harness without damaging the thing can take a long time. And whatever techniques you've got for unpicking, sometimes they just don't want to come apart very well, and you find yourself buried into one repair to get to the actual bit that needs repairing, pulling it apart carefully for anything up to a day before you're finished. We couldn't do that on a BPA rigging course. If we actually gave a live repair to somebody, we'd lose a day to it, and it might not end up with good repair at the end of it. And then there's the matter of distance from manufacturers. I believe that the reason we've come to build stuff, and we build so many components in this country, is not just that we haven't got our many manufacturers in this country, it's that all the bulk of the manufacturers are over there. Same statement, really. If our sport seems a bit slow sometimes, if you can imagine that every single pilot chute, toggle, freestow loop had to be bought and sent over from America, because that's where you buy them from, because our rules wouldn't let us build things, the sport would just evaporate. It just wouldn't happen. And I think, personally, that's why we end up with what we do. We build the stuff we build and put the emphasis on that, because without it, the sport would grind to a halt. Our exams have a lot of building components, not so much repairs to carry out, and you'd have to bear all that in mind. You'd still have to do final exams in the UK as normal. If you did this idea of mine, head over to Derek and work some hours. But then imagine at the end of it all, you've got your UK and your US ratings to stick on your CV. And as you might know, I'm quite passionate that we need to find better ways of getting what we do as a good entry on a CV for when we're actually trying to find a job. I still think we shouldn't be called riggers, we should be called technicians. And frankly, at the top end, we should be called engineers, not, because rigger is something that no one understands on a CV. In fact, in Al's field, you know, his other fields, rigging is something that the cinema world don't understand only too well. But it ain't sewing parachutes, it's sticking stuff up on roofs and gantries and scaffolding and Christ knows what. In summary, as riggers, we've got more in common than is different. This is an American course. This is a very recent British one. I think that's pretty similar people. And I've got a final thought. Bear in mind, I may have a final thought, I might not have written it down. We'll do that. It won't work, which is a shame. That would have been a beautiful bit of footage at 1:40 in the morning of Artemis 1 launching. But I'll tell you the story. I went, these meetings kicked in, and I kept getting better internet connection at Derek's place. So even after the course, I was going back and logging back on with this thing. The hotel didn't like that military laptop at all, so or it didn't like the hotel. So I got there and found that a meeting had just dropped into place at one place at DeLand, if I could make it by 2 that afternoon. And I'd heard that Artemis 1 was fueling. And I grew up in Apollo. I grew up with Thunderbirds. I wasn't going to miss that thing. So I raced back to the hotel, raided my own hotel for pillows and a change of clothes and stuff, and did the DeLand meeting, 2 hours up that way. Finished, thank you very much. Raced back down to Titusville, where the coach driver at NASA had said was a good place. Found the Mercury 7 Memorial Park, which just looks out 10 miles across the water, and you could see the thing from 10 miles away. And then went and found some food, went back, got the pillows out, got my head down in the car. And then as it got louder as people turned up, got myself up there, and it went at 1:40 in the morning. Unbelievable. This is great footage. You'd love it. But it went off like a nuclear bomb. No one at Titusville had seen anything like that since the Apollo days. And that's now the most powerful rocket in the world ever. It's just like, I can't describe it. You'd love that footage, really. You can say ooh now if you want. But yeah. Huge difference. One of the huge differences between what we do and how the FAA play. And I really believe that, this is where I really do go into my opinion, I really believe it may be worth looking at this one day. Because the FAA are all concerned with all emergency parachutes, that's the reserve and the container. There's very, very few rules about the main at all, including TSO stuff. It's all really talking about the reserve, the emergency canopy, and the container itself and the harness that saves you. Because they're all concerned with all emergency use parachutes and harnesses, they do encompass bailout rigs. There's a problem coming the UK gliding and the aerobatic community's way, in my opinion, as less and less British skydiving riggers get qualified in round packing, and as the bailout rigs out there get older. If there was a CAA-controlled emergency parachute technicians rating of some kind, I believe that these other parts of aviation would have better safety controls and governance, and we could be the subject matter experts to drive that. We could set that up for the gliders and for the bailout, the aerobatic pilots. The CAA would only be controlling a tiny country instead of what the FAA has, trying to literally control an entire continent. A CAA parachute technician could legitimately work on all those bailout rigs out there whilst being free of the British skydiving rules and limitations. That's a thought. That's me done. Thanks for your time. I'll take a question if you want, or ask any. I might even be able to answer it. Doctor.
Clarify, you said about Derek supervising basic riggers under their 300 hour scheme.
Yeah.
Did you say he can or can't?
I believe he can.
You believe he can?
Yeah. We don't let courses happen. We know that.
I believe he can't. And the reason is,
Go on.
when I did John O'Vaughan's rating, at the time he had 300 hours.
Yeah.
200 in the UK, 100 hours in Spain.
Right.
I was taking the riggers committee. They want to take my ratings off me because I wouldn't let him go on an exam course. I went to the riggers committee and argued for an hour in the riggers committee, just giving him an exam, just giving the opportunity, and I'm going to pass or fail. I'm not one of the examiners. And in the end, they sent me a letter reminding me of my responsibilities, because I shouldn't have done any supervising outside the UK. That's how serious it got. And then they agreed to let Jono attend an exam course because it wasn't his fault that I broke the rules. That was back then, and nothing's changed as far as I know.
I thought it was, I don't want to go back in time and try and remember what the minutes were, but I thought that it was, they weren't happy that the teaching part had happened. Because the syllabus, it was the supervising of, I can't remember, but, well,
I was part of it, so.
Then it may be, I mean, Derek and I did talk about this. Yeah, it's a good point.
At the moment, Derek should be able to run courses in there. It's a British advanced rigger. He should be able to run training courses. I don't see why not. It's just the country, just the location, right? So if he wants to do it the same as we can do it in the UK, the location shouldn't matter. In my opinion. But
yeah.
The riggers committee have always taken that stance. No, unless he's changed his mind since I've been out of the country.
I don't know if it's the committee or if it's the office that have said it's UK Crown property and something, or UK sovereign property.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's moot point in itself in terms of the way we interpreted that this place in Cyprus is okay because it's military.
Ditto Lipspringer, yeah.
Lipspringer, but Lipspringer wasn't military, it was not Crown property, it was something else. But that's a different argument, not really valid now. I mean, my belief, and again, you know, perhaps not totally right, is that we can't run courses outside of the UK. That a rigger is supervising something in this rigging room that happens to be somewhere, I really don't see that as being running a course. It's like, the argument about running a course is we should be able to pop in and see the course. You know, well, if you're running it in Florida, that's not ever going to happen. But supervising somebody doing a patch, supervising somebody doing a pack job, it's like, does it really matter where it is? I don't think so. But, you know, that's probably one of Alan's grey areas.
So AFF instructors shouldn't be running courses abroad. Same thing.
Well, we're not insured to run them abroad, but we accept that the person comes back with those qualifications.
Why do instructors get preference?
Maybe it's no, we're superheroes, mate. We're superheroes, but then superheroes don't get treated very well by everybody else, do they? Maybe it's. See, I think that we kind of touched on this at the course in December, didn't we? We're in a very different world with rigging courses now, because there was a time where nobody qualified as a rigger, and this Kiwi ran a course in Lipspring, and nobody else would touch it with a barge pole. None of the other rigging lofts and drop zones were remotely interested in giving a place over for a week to run a course. And if Kiwi hadn't been, he got that award from the Aeronautical Society for a reason, because I don't know how many years, 10? If you didn't get a course at Bill's, nobody was getting any qualifications in rigging at all. Now we got what, 1, 2, 3, 4 places? 4 or 5 different places, at least one of which isn't a drop zone, where you can go get a course. And I think that's what's changing things. And I think it might be worth writing a letter again and having another look at it. But I did say to Derek, to go back to this issue, at the time I said, you know, there will be a debate about this. I said, but I can certainly see you able to supervise. What I did say at the time to him was, I could see if you tried to run a course, and I thought about what you'd gone through. If you tried to run a course out here, first of all, you're paying for the course and going out there as a method 1. I could see that being a little bit more complex for someone trying to do that course. Go to America just to do a method 1 course, given that there's 4 other places in the UK you could already go.
You'd also have a bizarre thing where the FAA wouldn't be involved.
The FAA would not be involved.
Being issued abroad, which then they kick off.
Somebody would kick off somewhere, wouldn't they? But the way I could see it is, no, hang on a minute, you're a method 2, you're an AR, a method 2 counter signature that I've just made a pilot chute, yeah, that's good. That's not quite the same as formally running a course. And I could see that being less of an issue. But it's up to him, and if he gets any inquiries about people who want to go out there and do that. The other thing I tried to touch on there is, if you just go, I had a very, very special experience in that, you know, work paid, thanks work. But most people won't get that. They won't get to do that. And I can see a situation where you go out there and, like my mate from Vancouver, he's gone out there, but he's not just doing that. He's skydiving at Z Hills every weekend. He's hanging out at the drop zone, and then he walks into a little temporary bit of work at Skydive Wings right after the course. And I don't know what he was traveling in, but he might, for all I know, he's probably working his way back across America to Vancouver right now, hanging out at drop zones as he goes. I can see somebody hanging out at Florida for a summer and working at derricks and accumulating those hours that they need whilst enjoying Florida. But formally going out there for that quick 3-week burst or however long to get that course ticked, that's a bigger funding issue for the person doing it. It's gone quiet.
What is the ballpark cost?
I think, right, let me think. They flew me out there, British Airways, in the Disney compressed flight. My knees nearly fell off. But that was out that way to Tampa. I think I could have got it cheaper. The hire car was a big indulgence. Course itself was about 1,300, I think. So, yeah, I should think I probably am going to be searching to reclaim about $5,000, and I think they paid for the course and the flight up front. What the DNS or MOD paid for that flight is up to, I don't know what deal they've got. Car hire. That was a trip up. The MOD couldn't get me a vehicle because I said, well, I need an adapted car. And I was quite surprised. I'm going to have words with them about that. But in actual fact, I couldn't get an adapted car through the military car hire system. So I'm going to have a word with them about that. In all honesty. Well, I did send a rather necky, I did send a few email reports in to say I'm still here, by the way, to my boss. And I did send a rather necky one in on week 2 saying, right, look, I'm doing what I'm doing. I am finding out some absolute gems, like TS135 is about to be rewritten as TS136. That's something we didn't know, but it's in the pipeline. I said, you do know that the team itself could probably really do to shake some hands out at Reno. So I'm trying to email my boss and suggest we should all go to Reno in February from Florida. And he didn't answer that email. Oh, okay, fair one. Can't say I blame him, really. I did ask him to stop referring to, in the emails that were to all the bosses, saying, and Rick's still on his swan. I said, I'm at work, please, come on. But there we go. Nobody's got any other questions. I hope I kept you awake.